I pulled out of our driveway at 7:30 on a Saturday morning, and I remember thinking that the maple trees along Ridgewood Crescent had never looked so gold. My wife Constance had her coffee in a travel mug and her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She looked comfortable, relaxed. The way you look when you're doing something ordinary. Something you've done 100 times before. We were driving out to see our daughter. That's all it was supposed to be. A 2-hour drive from Barrie to the house she and her husband had bought just outside of Kingston. A weekend visit. Sunday roast, maybe a walk along the waterfront if the weather held. I'd packed a bottle of Niagara Pinot Noir in the back seat, and Constance had made her lemon loaf, wrapped in foil the way she always does, the way my daughter has been asking her to make since she was 9 years old. I didn't know at that point that we would never set foot inside that house. Constance was the one who figured it out, not me. I've had to sit with that for a long time. The fact that my wife saw what I couldn't see or wouldn't see because she didn't have the same blind spot I did. The blind spot shaped exactly like my daughter. Her name is Renata, she's 34 years old. And for reasons I am still, even now, trying to fully understand, she and her husband Steph had decided that my wife and I should not leave Kingston alive. Let me back up, I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years working for the Ontario Ministry of Transportation, most of it in infrastructure planning. Constance taught elementary school for 26 years, 3rd grade mostly. We are not wealthy people, but we are comfortable. We paid off the house in Barrie 11 years ago. We have a modest RRSP and a decent pension between the two of us. When I retired, I also came into an inheritance. My father passed in 2019 and left me the property in Prince Edward County. 42 acres, an old farmhouse, a barn. Not fancy, but the land alone was appraised at just under $900,000. That property is what this story is really about. I didn't realize it at the time. I should have. The signs were there for months, and I kept explaining them away the way fathers do when the alternative is admitting your own child has looked at you and seen nothing but an asset. Renata had always been the complicated one. Not troubled exactly. Bright. Very bright. She got a business degree from Queens, moved to Toronto, worked in commercial real estate for a few years. That's where she met Steph. His full name is Stefan Varga. He's 40 years old, Hungarian-Canadian, and he has the kind of smile that never quite reaches his eyes. I noticed that the first time I met him at Renata's apartment in Corktown. Constance noticed it too. We never said anything to each other about it. We were too busy being grateful she'd found someone. They got married 3 years ago. Small ceremony, nothing extravagant. Renata said they wanted to save the money. I gave them $40,000 as a wedding gift. A down payment on the house in Kingston. I didn't think twice about it. That's the kind of father I was. I didn't think twice. The first phone call that should have stopped me cold came in February, about 8 months before the drive I'm describing. Renata called on a Tuesday evening, and after a few minutes of small talk about the weather and the Ottawa Senators, she got to the point. She wanted to talk about the county property. Dad, Steph and I have been thinking. You're not getting any younger, and that land is just sitting there. Have you thought about what you want to do with it long term? I told her we'd looked into renting out the farmhouse as a short-term vacation rental, maybe through the summer months. There was good money in that, particularly in Prince Edward County, where tourism had been growing for years. She got quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That sounds like a lot of work, a lot of liability too. Steph thinks if you just transferred it now, got ahead of the probate issues, it would make things a lot simpler. For everyone." I told her I'd think about it. I didn't think about it. I just put it in the same mental drawer where I'd been filing away all the other things I wasn't ready to look at directly. 3 weeks later, Steph called me himself. That had never happened before. He was cheerful, professional, exactly the way he sounds when he's in realtor mode. He mentioned an estate planning firm in Kingston he'd been working with. Said they were very good, very reasonable. Said if we were ever in the area, it might be worth sitting down with them together. I thanked him and said maybe in the spring. He said, "We were thinking sooner, actually. There are some tax advantages to doing this before the end of the fiscal year." I said I'd have to talk to Constance. He said, of course, family first." Something about the way he said it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, just for a second. Then I let it pass. Constance did not let it pass. She is not a dramatic woman. She was not the kind of wife who made scenes or issued ultimatums or played games. She was steady, practical. But she sat across from me at our kitchen table that night, and she looked at me with an expression I had learned, over 41 years of marriage, to take seriously. "I don't like the way this is moving," she said. I told her it was probably just Renata being anxious about money, that Stefan was probably pushing her, that it would blow over. "Bernard," she said, "she only used my full name when she meant business. Your daughter is a grown woman with a business degree. She's not being pushed into anything she doesn't want to do." I didn't want to hear that, so I didn't. But Constance started paying closer attention. She's always been better at noticing patterns than I am. She started keeping track of little things. The way Renata would steer phone conversations back to the property. The way Steph had begun copying himself on emails about anything related to the county land. Emails I hadn't even addressed to him. The way Renata mentioned, twice in 1 month, that she and Steph had spoken to a lawyer about multi-generational estate structures. The way she laughed a little too easily when Constance asked what that meant. By September, Constance had a folder. An actual paper folder, the kind she used to use for parent-teacher files. Inside it were printed emails, notes she'd written to herself with dates and times, a printed copy of what she'd found when she searched Stefan Varga's name through the Ontario Corporate Registry. He had incorporated 3 numbered companies in the past 2 years. All 3 listed Renata as a co-director. None of these are his real estate brokerage, Constance told me. I checked, these are something else. I looked at the papers, I looked at my wife, and I said the most useless thing a man can say in that moment. Let's not jump to conclusions. She closed the folder. She didn't push, she just set it on the counter where I'd have to walk past it every day, and she waited. The invitation came in October. Renata called on a Sunday afternoon, warm and easy, nothing about property or lawyers or estate planning. Just her voice, the one I remembered from when she was small, when she'd crawl into our bed on Saturday mornings and demand pancakes. She said she and Steph were having some people over the following weekend. Nothing big. A few friends, a nice dinner. She wanted us to come and stay the night, make a real visit of it. We haven't had enough time together this year, she said, and her voice cracked just slightly, the way it does when she's being sincere, or when she wants you to think she is. Constance agreed to go. I asked her afterward if she was sure, and she said yes. She said she wanted to see the house in person. She said there were things you could only understand when you were standing in a room. I didn't fully understand what she meant. I do now. We planned to leave the Saturday morning. The Saturday in question. The one I started telling you about, with the gold maples and the travel mug and the lemon loaf wrapped in foil. We were on the 400 heading south when Constance got quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of a long drive, a different kind. She had her phone out and she was reading something. I left her to it. I had CBC radio on low, some program about the history of the St. Lawrence Seaway that I wasn't really listening to either. Just past Barrie, she asked me something that seemed odd at the time. Did Renata tell you who else was coming this weekend? Any names? I thought about it. She mentioned a couple from work. Steph's brother, maybe. Steph has a brother in Kingston? I think so. Why? She didn't answer right away. She went back to her phone. Then she said, "Did she send you an address?" I told her I had it in my GPS, the house on Lakeview Road, the one I dropped them off at when they first moved in. Okay, she said. Quiet again. About 40 minutes later, somewhere between Barrie and Aurelia, she put her phone face down on her lap and looked out the window for a long time. Then she turned to me. "Bern, I want to show you something. Don't panic, just look." She held up the phone. It was open to a Facebook profile, a woman named Celia Varga, listed as Stefan Varga's sister-in-law. A few scrolls down was a photo from 3 weeks ago, a caption that said something like family dinner, long overdue. In the photo, Stefan was there, Renata was there, and there were 2 other men I had never seen before, both large. One of them had his arm around Steph's shoulder in the way that people do when they know each other well, the casual ease of it. "I don't know who they are," Constance said, "but look at the comments." One of the comments, from an account I couldn't identify, had been deleted, but Celia Varga had replied to it and her reply was still there. It said, "Lol, yes, the boys have been very busy lately. Dad said don't ask questions." That was it. That was the whole thing. On its own, it was nothing. It could have been anything. But Constance had also been looking at property records that morning while I was loading the car. The land parcel for our county property had been searched, formally through the Ontario Land Registry, 3 times in the past 6 weeks. Twice by a company she didn't recognize. Once by a firm that, when she searched the name, brought up a single result. A litigation case from 2021 in which Stefan Varga had been named as a third party in a real estate fraud claim. The case had been settled out of court. Constance showed me all of this in a rest stop parking lot outside of Aurelia, where she had quietly asked me to pull over because she needed to use the restroom. And then when we were parked, she turned to me and said, "I don't think we should go. I want to be honest with you about what happened inside me in that moment." I didn't believe her. Not right away. The pull of not believing her was enormous. Not because I thought she was wrong, but because believing her meant admitting something I had been refusing to admit for months. That my daughter was not the person I thought she was. That the little girl who had wanted pancakes on Saturday mornings had grown into someone who looked at her father and saw a land parcel. "Constance," I said, "this is all circumstantial." She looked at me. She didn't argue, she just said, "Then let's call her right now and tell her we're not coming. If everything is fine, she'll be disappointed and we can reschedule." I reached for my phone. I started to dial Renata's number, and before it even rang, I had a feeling. It came from nowhere specific, just a sudden cold clarity. The way you feel when you reach for a railing in the dark and it isn't there. I ended the call before it connected. "Let's go home," I said. Constance didn't say anything. She put her hand over mine on the gear shift. We sat there for a minute in that parking lot with the sound of the highway behind us, and then I put the car in reverse and we drove back to Barrie. We did not go to Kingston that weekend. We told Renata that I'd had chest pains on the drive. A lie I am not proud of, but a necessary one. She sounded concerned. She sounded the right amount of concerned, which is to say, like a performance of concern. I noticed it this time, now that I was looking. I called my brother Alec that Sunday night. He's a retired RCMP officer, lives out in Kelowna now. I told him everything. He listened the way he always listened without interrupting, and when I was done, he said two things. First, you need a lawyer before you talk to anyone else. Second, do not go to that house, Byrne, not until you know what was waiting for you there. I hired a civil litigation lawyer in Barrie the following week. She had us sign nothing and say nothing to Renata or Stefan while she began making inquiries. What came back over the next several weeks was not the worst possible thing, but it was bad enough. Stefan's numbered companies had been used in a previous land acquisition scheme, the one Constance had found evidence of, where an elderly property owner in Frontenac County had been maneuvered, through a combination of forged consent documents and a complicit power of attorney, into transferring his farm at a fraction of its value. He had dementia. His family had not known. Stefan had walked away from that situation without criminal charges, because the main liability had fallen on a business partner who'd since died. But the civil record was there. The pattern was there. Our lawyer believed, she could not prove it, not yet, but she believed, that the plan for us had involved getting us to Kingston, into a social setting, where I would be presented with documents by someone posing as an estate planning professional. Documents transferring management authority over the county property to a numbered company. Possibly drafted to look like a routine estate freeze, the kind of thing a planner might recommend to reduce probate. Designed to be signed quickly, socially, over dinner, before I had time to read carefully, before Constance could look things up on her phone. The two men in the photo from Stefan's sister-in-law's page, we never found out exactly who they were or what their role would have been. My lawyer said it was possible their presence was simply meant to be social camouflage. Possible it was something else. She told me not to speculate. I tried not to. I mostly failed. Renata called us 3 more times over the following month. I took every call. I kept things warm, vague. I told her we'd been dealing with some health things that we hoped to visit before the new year. She sent a card for Remembrance Day. Constance and I sat at the kitchen table and read it together, and neither of us said anything for a long time. Inside the card she'd written, "Miss you both. Life is short. Let's not waste it." I don't know if she meant it as a threat. I still don't. In January, with our lawyer's guidance, we updated our wills. The county property was transferred into a family trust, properly, legally, with independent professional oversight, and no possibility of a quick signature making it disappear. We added a provision recommended by our lawyer that required 2 independent witnesses and a waiting period for any major asset transaction. We also, after considerable discussion, filed a report with the Ontario Provincial Police. We were honest that we had no direct evidence of criminal intent, only circumstantial evidence and a pattern that to us and to our lawyer looked like preparation for fraud. The OPP took a statement. They were professional and non-committal. They said they would note it on file. I don't know if anything ever came of that. I'd like to think it did. But I've stopped expecting certainty from these things. Stefan and Renata are still together, as far as I know. They still live in Kingston. I have not spoken to my daughter since March. That is the hardest sentence I have ever written down. Harder than describing the moment in the rest stop parking lot. Harder than the phone call to my brother. Harder than anything. My daughter. The little girl who fell asleep on my shoulder at Maple Leaf Gardens in 1997 watching a game we lost 4-1. Who didn't care because she was 8 years old and just happy to be out late. Who I taught to drive in an empty Canadian Tire parking lot on a Sunday morning in November. Who I walked down the aisle 3 years ago with her hand inside my arm, and her face lit up like something I had never seen before and hope I never misread again. I don't know who that woman is now. I don't know which part of what I knew about her was real. Constance tells me some of it had to be real. She says love like that doesn't get manufactured. She says Renata got somewhere she never should have gotten, and that doesn't unmake everything that came before. I believe her. I'm trying to. We spent last summer on the county property for the first time. Just the 2 of us, a couple of weeks in July. The farmhouse needs work. The porch boards are rotting through and the kitchen is 40 years out of date. But it sits on a rise that looks out over a field goldenrod. And in the evening, when the light gets long and low, there is nothing wrong with the world that you can see from where you're standing. Constance painted watercolors from the porch. I fixed what I could and left a list of what I couldn't for next summer. In the evenings, we sat in old lawn chairs and listened to the frogs. My brother Alec drove out from Kelowna to join us for the last few days. We sat on that porch, the three of us, and we talked about our parents, and about the farm our father had grown up on in Manitoba, and about the specific irreplaceable weight of land that has been in your family long enough to mean something. The property is safe now. The trust is in place. No one can take it with a pen and a forged smile at a dinner table. I tell you all of this not because I want sympathy. I don't need sympathy. I am 67 years old, I have my health, I have my wife, I have 42 acres in Prince Edward County that look like a painting at 7 o'clock on a July evening. I tell you this because I nearly didn't. Because on a Saturday morning in October I nearly kept driving south on the 400, telling myself that circumstantial evidence was nothing, that a father's instinct about his daughter was more reliable than his wife's research, that everything would make sense once we got there and sat down. I tell you this because my wife had a folder, and because when she told me to pull over, I pulled over. That's all it took. Just that. 41 years of learning to trust the person sitting next to you, and one parking lot in Orillia where I finally stopped arguing with what I already knew. We drove home. The maples were still gold. The lemon loaf rode in the back seat all the way to Barrie, and that night we ate it at our own kitchen table, just the two of us, and it tasted exactly like it was supposed to.